Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. I am here today with former member of Knesset, Dr. Aliza Lavie, who is the author of Iconic Jewish Women. And we're also here with Dina Glickman, who is the translator of Dr. Lavie's book. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Judy.
I wanted to start off, talking about the background of the book. So, Aliza, can you tell the audience a little bit about your inspiration for writing Iconic Jewish Women?
First of all, thank you, and nice to speak again with Dina after the long journey that we had and have with the book. You know, it's not only translation; it's actually rewriting. The Hebrew book, עכשיו תורך, means now it's your turn. It's your turn to tell the story, your turn to be part of the story, your turn to understand that there is a story. And when we start walking, on this thinking to share the book with our sisters that can't speak Hebrew or don't speak Hebrew, or there is no way that they will understand Hebrew in the coming years. We understood from the beginning that to tell the story, it's not enough. And more than that, that we need to think about other directions and figures, role models, to via them to tell the story. And actually, to inspiration or the beginning of this book started years ago while I was in the journey of Tfilat Nashim, my book, a Jewish prayers book that was published, Tfilat Nashim in Hebrew, and was published in by Random House. And via the book tour in the States, I met several women that told me that they didn't celebrate Bat Mitzvah. And actually, they're not that familiar with what is mitzvah and why the boys and their brothers and children have bar mitzvah and they didn't. And more questions like this. I remember the other day that I was asked to give a lecture about Queen Esther in Boston, and it was a Hadassah organization. So, I planned a lecture about Esther the Queen, and English is not my mother tongue, so I prepared myself and thought about the lecture, etc., etc. And suddenly, just before I started the lecture, one of the women asked me, Aliza, we named after Hadassah. I mean, we are Hadassah organization, but can you tell us who was Hadassah? And, from that moment during my journey, and when I came back with the thinking to Israel and met other questions, but in between, I realized that one day I will publish a book that tell our mother's stories. It's not a history book. It's a book that gave us hands and experience that we need to bring back to our life, because in a way, it's our mother tongue, tradition, heritage.
And so you've said that that you don't just see this as your fifth book that's coming out, but that you see this as your shlichut and you see it as your life's mission. And so can you tell us about that? Like what is this mission? What's your vision for the use of the book and to to help young women and actually bat mitzvah girls of all ages? What is this shlichut that you're talking about?
I think more women understand these questions that you ask in our time here in Israel, and actually in all the world, what we see now happening. And I think more and more men and women understand that it's the time for women leadership in the communities and nations, and we are wondering what is all going on, and actually where are the women tools of leadership. But first of all, what is the women leadership? What is all about? And always when you have questions in your life, that's what I always recommend to my students, to my children. Go and find the answer. Go and make your own research. And actually, Judy, that's what happened to me. I found that I have a lot of questions that I couldn't find answers as a social activist, that I was, asked, why are you doing this, and what is all about, and what is this book, and why you bring all this knowledge back. And more and more I learn and study, I realize that I'm not that familiar with my heritage as Jewish woman. And actually, my shlichut, or my understanding, is that our mothers knew a lot of knowledge that unfortunately we are not that familiar with. And this knowledge, this Torah by heart, we need it. We need it in our days more than ever. And even in, our books, it says, Shma beni Torat avicha ve'al titosh, Shma beni musar avicha ve'al titosh Torat imecha. The moral of the father and the Torah of the mother. So what is this Torah? What is this Torah? And more you become familiar with our mothers from the Bible, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Miriam, Ruth, Esther the Queen, etc., etc., you become familiar with, first of all, of course, sisterhood, but more than that, how they lived. How one day, Esther the Queen, that we know her as a beauty queen, became a leader. And in, one moment, she changed her status from one that didn't even say one word in the half of the Megillah. She was passive, and suddenly she became active, and she gave the orders to Mordechai that he was the one that led till then. And in the beginning, she didn't want to take the risk. She didn't want to went to the, Achashverosh, the king. But when she realized that she is going and nobody can make the work and the mission instead of her, she started to give the orders. And she gave the order, go and make fast all the people. And she, the one that made the people united. And she knew how to do it. The same ritual with Miriam the prophet, same ritual with Deborah. And the more you become familiar, a lot of knowledge to bring back, and we need it in our time.
So how do you describe that turning point? I mean, in the book, you outline 59 women
In the women
who were remarkable in so many different ways. And I'm curious if, each one of them obviously has their own story, but with these narratives that you were just talking about, what would you say is that turning point that makes them go from passive to active to leaders? Is it something in their personalities, or is it something in the circumstances?
These women didn't prepare to be famous or well known, or they understood that they need to take responsibility. If you are looking for, the same ritual or narrative in these role models and why we chose them, in the Hebrew version, there is 71 role models, and in the English version, 59, and responsibility and understanding that they need to take care and continue and lead and be the one that tell other people what to do and be there. And they understood it, and they left everything and run the community. And I think they was there. And actually, after October 7, I think that we met a lot of women that didn't wait that someone will knock on the door, and they took the responsibility until taking the responsibility. And actually, this is our story. This is our story.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you're saying that, because you designed this book to be specifically for bat mitzvah girls, and as much as Hebrew schools and Jewish day schools try and impart this feeling and sense of responsibility to youngsters and to young adults, I think many educators see that bar and bat mitzvah kids sort of see their bat mitzvah and their bar mitzvah as like a graduation party, and after they have their celebration, they stop with their Jewish learning, they stop going to Hebrew school classes, and some of them do carry on a sense of that responsibility as as a Jew, but they stop with their formal education. And so I'm wondering, if you have any advice or guidance for parents and educators out there about how to keep students and how to keep youngsters engaged in Jewish learning so that they can continue developing this sense of responsibility that you're talking about.
But mitzvah is a junction for the family, is suggestion to bring the parents' responsibility back to education, to heritage. Don't wait that the organizations or schools will do homework for you. Unfortunately, we in our generation think, or it's much more comfortable that shul or synagogue or other organization will take care of this year of bat mitzvah. No, I want to bring it back to the family, to the one that chaperone or be with the 12 years old, 11 years old, 10 years old together, make the journey together, the family, and start from it. Because, what I heard, and I know, and I part of the community, that, but mitzvah, bar mitzvah is not the end of the story, the end of the contact with the community is only the beginning. And unfortunately, we see that many of us, for them, it's the end of the story. And it's not the last junction, is the first junction. And be part and then tell the story. And it's an opportunity to share the story and learn by yourself. And, my suggestions is to find the role model that you feel comfortable with, have experience to share. If you are shy, or if you want to be leader, or if you want to be dancer, or other wishes or thinking, or like Donna Grazza, she betrayed by her sister. Her sister, told the Inquisition that she's Jewish, and if we want to speak about this area with sister, with friends, with the double meaning, etc. And we can use our generation's tool, to be to be ambassadors of the story, because the young generation know how to tell a story via TikTok or via other media, and we can use it. Tell the story about Deborah the prophet, your friends in the party or in your TikTok account, and make it and tell the story and be part of it. It's your knowledge, it's your tradition. We need to tell our sisters and brother and mothers stories because it's so important to bring it back. It's not a history lesson. No, not at all. And not only in Judaism, even Virginia Woolf said, if you want to have women that are going to take responsibility and to be the leaders, they need to know who were their mothers and where
Do
are
you
they
see,
from.
sorry, do you see, are there similarities or differences that you see between let's say the bat mitzvah girls in Israel and the bat mitzvah girls in the United States, Canada, English-speaking countries? Are there similarities, differences?
It depends. It depends on the communities and the schools and parents' responsibility. But in Israel, it's when you have the awareness, it's easy to be guided or to have help. There are a lot of projects or programs, and the Hebrew, even though that many of us are not that familiar, but we know Hebrew. Hebrew is a treasure. I saw it and I see it, and since October the 7th, many women are asking questions about identity and about and when you're not familiar that with the language, not that it's in English and other languages is, but it's, I think, much more difficult, and this how to, and Dina can elaborate about this, how to tell the story, because you can't only write Deborah the prophet, what it means prophet, who was, why, I mean, how come that she can be a prophet or a judge or a strategic in the army. Who was she, and what is Bethlehem, and why is that? And the average knowledge you need, it's really complicated. And I know that in the States there are a lot of projects and in schools, but I think here in Israel and also in other countries we need to bring it to the responsibility of the family. It's not enough in the community and in the organizations, and it's opportunity to the family, mother, grandmother, father, sister, aunt, to be part of it. And I know from my experience that many women, adults, share with me that they didn't even know the names of the women that are in the book, and they were shocked why everybody knows Korchak and Janusz Korczak, and not the woman that opened the house for the children. And who was she? And why Tzvia Lubatkin? Nobody, really know about her activity in Warsaw Ghetto. And more women that did the work, but actually, unfortunately, there is no attention for their activities, and even and there are not enough roads and streets named after them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've wondered about that myself. So you started to talk about the translation and some of the challenges that have come up in the translation. And I'm curious, maybe we could sort of shift to Dina as the translator. Dina, what were some of the challenges that came up for you when you were working on the English edition of the book?
And so I think, first of all, before we even started translating, we sat down and talked about what the different target audiences we're going to need to see. So where an Israeli bat mitzvah would look a certain way, a North American or a British or a South African, Australian bat mitzvah would look different. Just physically, how it would be celebrated. That was one thing we wanted to talk about. And the other thing we wanted to talk about was who we were including in the book, because there were some heroines or really interesting women who weren't included who would be important to girls reading the book around the world. So first of all, we sat down and we talked a lot about which women we would want to include and which women were maybe a little less necessary, because the book was very Israel focused and there were a lot of Israeli women who were important, but maybe were going to be less compelling to a different audience. And so we debated for a very long time, and we came up with a list of women that we wanted to include, and with a list of women who, while very important, maybe would remain in the Hebrew book, but not in the English book. And so we removed about 21 women and we added 10. And some of these were really exciting, different kinds of, there were some of the most important women that, Israeli girls wouldn't know about, like Bella Abzug, who was just a phenomenal activist and politician at a time when there weren't a lot of women in politics in America. Or Regina Jonas, who was the first woman to get Orthodox ordination and who was killed in Nazi Germany during the Holocaust. They were really interesting women, and we wanted to make sure that the book was looking to a more global audience. So we included a lot of 10 new women, which was important. The other thing we talked about was what a bat mitzvah celebration looks like in different countries. So I happened to be, having just finished one daughter's bat mitzvah, and my other daughter's bat mitzvah was 2 years away when we started the book. And so I had given a lot of thought to this, because I also have boys, and boys have maybe in Orthodox communities a more specific bar mitzvah. You read from the Torah and you have a party or a kiddush or whatever it is.
There's more of a formula for boys, right, with the bar mitzvah.
And girls, you can be more flexible and creative, which is what we were with my girls. But I know that in North American bat mitzvahs, because I have friends, it's very often a specific kind of party. And I remember what my bat mitzvah was. And I know that that's just the Orthodox communities, but in other communities, there are also parties, or they'll be reading from the Torah, but there are very specific things that are done. And there are almost always chesed projects with people who are taking a bat mitzvah seriously. One of the things that I did to research, because I took research very seriously, was I read one of my daughter's books called Becoming Brianna, which is a book about a girl's bat mitzvah, and it's a graphic novel, and it gives you, and it was really nice for me to see a different kind of bat mitzvah than the one I had, but also to get a sense of what bat mitzvahs were in different communities. This was very serious research, and it was a great book. So what we ended up doing was, where the original Hebrew book had every chapter was a biography of a woman, and then it went into ideas for how you would celebrate your bat mitzvah, and it was usually a location in Israel that you could visit that was related to that woman, and maybe some kind of idea of something you could do where Israelis are more flexible with their bat mitzvah celebrations. We said we were going to do 4 different elements. And so now in the English book, every chapter ends with 4 elements. It's the biography of the woman, and then it's something you can learn, something you can, a chesed, a kindness project you can do, a volunteer project, or a way to reach out to your community. It is a place you can visit. We kept in the places you can visit, and it's a wild card. And so any girl reading the book can pick up the book and maybe identify with one woman or find one woman interesting, and then say, oh, I'd like to learn about this. And they can pick and choose what they want to do for their bat mitzvah that is meaningful to them. And different chapters have really wildly different kinds of ideas of things you can do, so that if you identify with, I don't know, the women who are spies, and there are a few of those in the book, or the women who are scientists, and there are a few of those in the book, or women who are creative in some way, you can pick, you can read all the spies and pick like one thing from one woman's chapter, one thing from another woman's chapter, until you have molded a bat mitzvah celebration that's meaningful to you. And so that was a lot of fun. It was a really fun process translating this book, because it was a really creative process.
And when it came to, similar to what Aliza was saying before about certain locations or certain concepts that, let's say, native Hebrew speakers would understand those concepts naturally, how did you go about explaining them and conveying them in the English edition?
So our guiding principle was, everybody has to be able to read this book and understand it. We're not using Hebrew terminology in the book. If we do, and it's in italics, it's in the gloss, there'll be an explanation. You can't just read it without understanding it. So there are explanations everywhere. And there are further explanations in a glossary at the back. So anything in, I think it's bold in the book, anything in bold in the book, you can read at the back with an explanation. Anything that's a word that is not originally in English, that's not well known, will be given in italics anyway, just to differentiate it. We wanted to make sure, we really debated, there are a lot of terminology, there's a lot of ideas that are well known to some people in certain Jewish communities, but not in others. The most important thing was that it was inclusive, that anybody could read it and anybody could find their place in it, and nobody would feel out of their depths at all. So that was one guiding principle, was inclusivity. And that was big. Like, we spent a lot of time debating what terms would be used where, and what terms needed to be in the glossary, and how to make sure that everybody reading the book felt good with the book.
When you were going about choosing the different personalities to include in the book, were there particular categories that you were aiming to include, certain professions that you were aiming to include? And just to follow up from that question, how did you go about actually researching some of the more obscure figures who are in the book?
So the original book, the Hebrew book, was already researched. So most of the people had already been researched. When we talked about, and I think that I will say, when we talked about who else we would want to include, Aliza felt very strongly that a woman who is important within Judaism is somebody who has contributed to her community in one way or another. And so it wasn't just a woman who was Jewish who did something important, because there are a million of those, but it was a woman who was Jewish to whom Jewish community was important. So, and there were already, we didn't really have categories, but there were already scientists and creators, and there are so many different, and of course, religious leaders. There were a lot of really interesting religious leaders who have kind of fallen by the wayside. And Aliza, when you were talking before about the stories that you want to tell, or the stories that your books tell, I think the word that kept coming up was reclaiming, because a lot of Aliza's books, all of Aliza's books, are about reclaiming things that women in Judaism had at one point that seem to have, for some reason, disappeared for no good reason. So Aliza's books are women's prayer and women's customs, and now this, which is also reclaiming stories that for some reason we don't know. So one really good example, and this is Osnat Barazani, who was known as the Tanait in Kurdistan, where she ran a yeshiva, even though she was married
in Kurdistan.
And it's a fascinating story that has just been rediscovered. Before Aliza's book came out, there was a children's book that was put out about it.
Oh, wow.
About Osnat Barazani. And like, here's a woman who existed, and she would set precedents, and nobody talks about her. Why not? These are stories that we should be reclaiming. And so those are the stories.
I'm very curious about that, though. You just hit on something, and Aliza, maybe you can comment on this. Why not? Why have these stories not been told? Why is it like, I find this topic fascinating, and Aliza, you touched upon this also at the launch event in Jerusalem about some of the stories that we know about the male counterparts, and yet we don't know about the female, the heroines of a lot of these stories. Can you comment on that? Why is that?
First of all, it's not unique to our history as Jewish women, it's all over. Actually, in Hebrew, there is no translation for the word history. There is no, we say in Hebrew, historia. And why is that? It's a different lecture. Because in Hebrew we say, we don't have history, we live the reality. Our mission is to tell the story. We are telling the story all the time. It's not history. The most important mitzvah in Pesach is to tell the story, to sit together, all the family, not to be part of organization, or to sit together in your family, even people that you didn't, meet in the last year, bring back all the people and sit together and tell the story and ask the questions. And children are deeply involved in all these, testimonies and sitting, together. But the word history is his story. This is the meaning. Who edit the history? Who decided what will be included in the history and not? And actually, our mother's tongue, from that we got it from mother to daughter, from grandmother to granddaughter. I remember I grew up with my grandmother that came from Afghanistan, 1920, to Jerusalem, to the Bukharian neighborhood in Jerusalem. And my granny knew everything by heart. She didn't know how to read and how to write, but my grandmother knew all the Torah by heart. And I remember as a child when I went with her to the synagogue in the Bukhari neighborhood in Jerusalem. It's called Baba Tama, very, very beautiful synagogue. And when the Baal Koreh, when the man that read in the Torah had mistakes, women from the women balcony, from Ezrat Nashim, said, hey, you need to do this or to say that. And they knew everything by heart. What's happened in our generation? That we know how to read and how to write. And, we have dissertation, we are writing, we are teachers, lecturers, officers in the army, judge, whatever, you name it, all, the high level positions. What happened to our knowledge, ability, the stories? And we need to ask the question. And unfortunately, when I realized that I'm not like my grandmother, even though that I know how to write and how to read, and I wrote dissertation in university, and I was in the Israeli army and I'm officer in the army, but I'm not, that familiar with my heritage, with my, history as Jewish women. And in my daily life, as a social activist and legislator in the Israeli parliament, I realized that knowledge is power. And if you really want to lead and to change and to make legislation, or to change and make the tikkun olam that we are talking all the time, you need to know, and we need, all of us, as women, as Jewish people, as people of all the world, knowledge is something that we need to share. And if so many women had amazing experience, why not to use it?
Yeah.
That's why, by the way, why we don't have a word for the word history.
Using that as a springboard then, and going back to something that actually Dina was talking about in terms of using and applying the stories from the book and the activities in the book. This is a question for both of you. Do you see this book as being a resource for, Aliza, you spoke about using it together, as a family, but do you see this as being something that a group can use together?
Yeah, we thought about it, and some activities, are talking about the group, or use it via the party, and make your journey go. If you are even, if you are writing about Emma Lazarus, who was Emma Lazarus? I mean, everybody. I mean, not everybody, but it's really famous. Status of State of Liberty, in New York, and Emma Lazarus. Why her song, chosen to be on the statue? Who was she, and why is that? And okay, if your daughter want to visit in the States, or want to go to New York, or whatever, make the ceremony there, be, and tell the story there. Who was Emma Lazarus? Who was Henrietta Szold? Who was Ruth Bader Ginsburg? And compare it to Miriam Ben Porat. Both of them, they grew up in the Russia zone. Miriam came to Israel. Ruth Bader the family came to the States, and in between, what in between them? Compare Donna Grazia to Herzl. By the way, Donna Grazia, she was the one that got the permission from the Turkish, to build Tiberia. Herzl didn't. Why everybody remember Herzl and not Donna Grazia? And why is that? Who was Donna Grazia, by the way? So more you ask questions, and more you know your daughter, and if you feel that you are not that familiar, so it's opportunity to know and to make your own journey in your family via this book.
I will also add that I think while the primary purpose is kind of speaking to a specific bat mitzvah girl and her family, like I think we've given a really easy cheat sheet resource to synagogues, to temples, to schools, to youth groups. Like I think that curricula can be built around this book. I think that bat mitzvah programs can be built around this book. I think it gives just a lot of information and just useful information to build an entire program. So I really do think it can be used in a lot of different ways.
Definitely. So I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts about the current situation that many Jewish people, especially Jewish students, are dealing with right now all over the world, specifically on college campuses. I think, we're seeing that, obviously there are a lot of protests, anti-Israel protests, anti-Semitic protests, and people are scared. People are scared. Jewish students are scared to be visibly Jewish, to voice anything related to their Judaism. And it sounds like a lot of the material that you included in the book could be useful for them to have either, role models, or to see some of the challenges that they went through. And I'm curious if you can comment on that, if you see any connection between the book and the stories that you have in the book and what's going on now for Jewish students around the world.
First of all, take care. Take care. It's not an easy time, and be aware. And what can I say? I told and share about my granny that came from the Afghanistan to Israel, 1920. She didn't wait. She was Zionist, and she understood that redemption is coming, and they left everything. But my other granny that came from Bucharest, she didn't want to come to Israel. She didn't. She was a modelist in 1920 in Europe. She had a fashion studio, and after she came, I mean, she didn't even want to speak Hebrew. She remembered always what she had there, even though that Hitler burn her house and studio, fashion studio, etc., etc. So I think these two role models of my grandmothers are our story. Everybody can make his own decision, but either you know or either someone else remind you. But for all of us, and all of us are brothers and sisters, and we need to take care. And it's suggestion to know and to share. And the books are always on the shelf. You just need to take a moment and be part of amazing women's circle, that you are not alone and we are here and all together. And sometimes when you don't find answers and there are a lot of situations that you are not familiar with and you ask yourself suddenly what's happened, the world has changed. It's not the first time in our history. And be clever enough to know that women and men before you had the same situations. Remember, Herzl start his journey as Jewish leader when he heard the words dead to the Jewish people. And he asked himself, why not only to the officer, that betrayed? Oh, the French people thought that he said, and I'm talking about Dreyfus, and Herzl asked himself why the words is against all the Jew. What's happened? And from that question, he made his own journey. And thanks to him, we have Medinat HaYehudim, the house of the Jewish people, all of the Jewish people. So everybody has to make his own, decision. But I think that more we know and more we understand that we are brothers and sisters, we can help each other.
Beautiful. So you're saying that sometimes there are opportunities for growth and opportunities for creating something that come from these difficult moments and these difficult situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Dina or Aliza?
I think that we are here, and we will be more than happy to have questions from people that are watching us, and they can write to us. And we have a site for the book in Amazon and also in my site, alizalavie.com. And all of us, Dina, that it's an opportunity to thank you for all this amazing work, and Judy, to you, that you are helping so much to tell the story of the book in the non-Hebrew speaking world, and be part of this story and be ambassador of our story. It's not the book. I mean, the book is only the beginning. And make your own journey and continue the research and bring back all the knowledge and be ambassadors of our mothers and fathers.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And see yourself. You become ambassadors of this amazing project. Thank you so much.
Make sure to check out Iconic Jewish Women on Amazon and Jewish bookstores everywhere. Thank you both.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Shalom.